Hey, what is going on, you guys? It's your boy, I'm One for Orange, aka I'm One for Arige, back at it again with another competitive analysis video on the Pokemon Planet meta, specifically this time looking at T1. Now, if you missed the last video, I did an analysis on the importance of speed creep, and I did this in terms of Pokemon Planet more as a whole, the T2 and BQ meta. I think it's a very excellent starting point for those new to the competitive scene to dive into a more broad sense. So if you missed that video, there will be a link in the description, or you can check out my channel. It's available at any time. But this video goes out to those who bring a Swellow to the fight, slap a choice specs on it, and hope to just have an easy win plowing through everything on the opponent's team. You're clicking Boom Burst, expecting to kill everything in sight, when all of a sudden this fat ass Empoleon switches in and only takes 28% from the Boom Burst and heals off some of it with its leftovers. All of a sudden you're in a bad spot as this Empoleon is knocking off everything, setting up rocks on you, and scald burning your Feraligatr. Well, certainly this is something that is very, very hard to avoid, as Empoleon is a defensive powerhouse in this meta. And in this video we'll be going over ways to counter it, check it, and the sets that make it as effective as it is. As you'll see by the stats, Empoleon is quite hard to deal with, but we'll be getting into that in just a little bit. For now though, if you're new to the channel, go ahead and leave a like, sub, or a comment. It really helps me out to know what you guys like. And as you guys know, these videos are very podcasty in nature. I don't really do a whole lot of fancy editing. I sit here and talk, so if you'd like to get on with your day, go for your morning walk, your jog, or have your tea. I'm not offended in any way. Just put on the audio in the background, watch the video as you like, and that's all I ask. Take in what you can, and let's get right into it. Starting with the usage stats. Now, the usage stats themselves aren't that important for my argument in this case. I will say that Empoleon is rising in usage. With last week, it was at number 32, and now it has climbed to 28. That's an impressive climb. But it's not really a spammable threat yet in terms of being in the top 20, 15, or top 10. But it is something to monitor. At the time of this video, which is August 2nd, 2021, it is 28th in usage, and it has climbed 4 from last week. I'll let you pause the video if you would like to take a look at the other usage stats, but we will be getting into the main argument before we get into the sets, which is the win rate. Now, win rate stats are very suspect by nature, and so let me explain why before we jump into Empoleons. We require a large enough sample size for win rate to actually be validated in believing that this Pokemon has a win rate of that high over the course of many different games. And to show how this argument can be flawed, looking at Basculin at number 6, this is the 6th highest win rate in the entire tier, and it has a 75% win rate. But what you'll notice about this statistic is it only has 16 battles to its name. So this is what we call a very low sample size, and it is not something that I believe is indicative of what is truly going on in the tier. But Empoleon at number 3 has a sample size of 1,142 battles, and in those over 1,000 battles, it has managed an 80% win rate. Now, that 80% win rate means that in 4 out of 5 battles that Empoleon is used in, the Empoleon user wins. And this win rate is even crazier when you think about the fact that if 2 players bring an Empoleon, well, there's 1 winner and 1 loser. So in the case of a mirror match, the win rate actually always goes down because the average win rate for that match is 50% with 1 win and 1 loss. So in actuality, the Empoleon's win rate statistic is just absolutely huge. The only other Pokemon with over 1,000 battles in the top 10 is Entei, which also has a very respectable win rate, but 80% is quite a higher number than Entei's 74%. So as I said in the intro, this is a Pokemon that people are certainly struggling with. And what sets are the ones that people are struggling with, and what do those sets do? Well, without further ado, let's get right into the sets. So the first set, and the most common set in the Empoleon usage hierarchy is definitely the specially defensive set. And this set has one huge purpose in the meta, and that is to check special attackers, get them in freely, and spread your status. And the most amazing thing about this set, in my opinion, is how flexible your move slots are. So I have a set that I showed in a previous video here, which is Scald, Knockoff, Protect, and Stealth Rock. But the example we'll see today does not use this set. There are other options. Instead of Knockoff, you can run something like Toxic. And if you already have rocks on your team, you can certainly run Defog. Your coverage move doesn't even need to be Scald. Now, Scald is great for spreading burn, but if you want a bit of a better matchup against stuff like Flagon coming in, or in the case of hitting Mandibus super effectively, you can run Ice Beam. And Protect isn't even necessary. As much as I love the move, you can run something like Roar. So somehow already, we've managed to change every single move on this Empoleon from what the initial set was. Now, even though I think some of these moves might be out of place, this is a very legitimate set as well. And it goes to show how flexible this Pokemon can be. Even being able to run, I wouldn't run it as your only attack, but you can run Grass Knot to deal with the opposing water ground types such as Seismitoad and Swampert that are slowly but surely rising in usage in the meta. There are quite a few things you can do with this Pokemon. And like I said, the point of this is to check special attackers. Let's start by looking at some calcs, and then we will quickly go into some actual examples. So I have the Empoleon set here all ready to go. A sassy nature, if you're running Knockoff, is preferred just to not lower your attack, even though you can run Calm, no problem. And if we look at the Swellow Boom Burst example I said in the beginning, which is timid choice specs, Boom Burst is doing 24 to 28%. Now, in a tier where there are very few switch-ins to Boom Burst, when we have Slowbro, for example, even max HP Slowbro taking 72 to 85% from a Boom Burst. And I know Slowbro isn't seen as a special wall, but this damage having a chance to pretty much kill with just a little bit of chip is, yeah, it's very prominent in Empoleon's case, in my opinion. So here's the Empoleon set again. And what exactly does this do? Well, as you can see, you don't really need to hit 252 SpDef in this case, because the Boom Burst damage, it's still not doing any damage. So you run 184 SpDef with this 76 defense, and I think the 76 defense is huge. One of the threats that I went over in a video is Crocodile, and just by having a mixed spread here of 248 HP, 76 defense, you're always guaranteed to live an unboosted Earthquake from Jolly Crook. And from Cobalion's Close Combat, you also live that guaranteed. So on both of these Pokemon, you can get off a somewhat strong Scald. In Crocodile's case, when you're in Torrent range, it's dead. So running this kind of mixed bulk is good. And just be sure that when you're calcing for something like this, don't copy the EV spread blindly. Always check with your own IVs and make sure that you're actually surviving the Earthquake as you're supposed to. As in this calculator here, the low defense and best mostly comes from the fact that I have 31 HP and 31 defense. So this may need to be adjusted in your case. But a plus SpDef nature is definitely required. I would not go out of your way to get a bold one or a relaxed one. I think having as much SpDef as possible is definitely going to be to your benefit. So that is how I would build this set. And those calcs are huge. A few other things you can switch into as an Empoleon is Gardevoir, which is number 11 in usage. And Moonblast and Psychic both don't do anything. And Thunderbolt can do some damage, as you can see here. It isn't even a 2-hit KO though, which is quite impressive. So even if they get the play right, it's actually pretty unimpressive damage. And Empoleon also does get a guaranteed Toxic off on Feraligatr, Here's a Jolly for Alligator set, and let's say I did set up a Dragon Dance here and got to +1/+1. The strongest move I can use is Crunch, which is not doing that impressive of damage. So I am able to fire off a Toxic, protect for some chip, and do that in that regard. So Empoleon, even when it is at its most useless, maybe in a battle with a bunch of physical attackers, it still does have some use. Now, the Empoleon set certainly comes into handy in this game. Shout out to Zhoradin for letting me use this footage. His channel will also be in the description. So as you can see, his Noivern is specs, and it kills this Crocodile here. And the opponent is going to revenge kill with the Scarf Gardevoir. Now, the Scarf Gardevoir actually is not going to get any kind of good momentum here, even though there is a Rhyperior, which is weak on its special side, Sceptile, which wouldn't appreciate chip. Noivern has to get out of here. Cofagrigus is pretty passive, but is an option, and Toxicroak is dead to most of its moves. So Zhoradin makes the decision to go into Empoleon, and we're going to see just how little damage the Empoleon takes from the Moonblast. After Rocks, which did 6%, it's only down to 75, and leftovers are going to heal it up back to 82%. So this is a fantastic switch into a common Pokemon in the tier, and as we'll see from his moveset here, he can do a few things here. He can defog those rocks away, he can predict the Swellow to come in and either Ice Beam it or put it on a timer, or really putting anything on a timer on the opposing side of the field can be good. For maybe a Sceptile sweep could be in the future here, but it's fantastic. And to look at the other things, you know, of course, if you have rocks on this set, it definitely punishes 3 of the remaining Pokemon here, with the only one that's not taking extra damage from rocks being forced out here, which is pretty nice. Knockoff would also be great. Maybe knocking off the Gardevoir if it had to stay in for some reason, or if it wasn't Choice Scarfed. Knockoff could have been pretty good here. Or best case scenario, knocking off the Swellow Choice Specs. There were quite a few potential plays here with what Zhoradin could have done with a different set. So that's very impressive. And then scrolling just a little bit further ahead, we're going to have a different situation where the Toxicroak is going to die here. He goes back into Noivern to revenge kill. Anything that wants to come in here is going to be dying to Boom Burst. So we'll see Zhoradin quickly make work of this Mandibuzz. And then the only thing that PZNX can do is go back into Gardevoir. And then you have this Empoleon that just isn't going anywhere anytime soon, coming right back in. And this time the Gardevoir is forced to stay in and take this Toxic. And then it is prone to being Protect stalled here. Absolutely incredible Pokemon in terms of what it can do to change the matchup here. Empoleon Spadef set showing that even though it doesn't have access to something like Roost or Recover, its leftovers recovery and its defensive typing is enough to keep it around for a very long time. This set is probably the one that people are struggling with the most with Empoleon, this Spadef set, to break through it. And the obvious answer to that is just brute force through physical attackers. And we will be getting into the counters at the very end. But without further ado, we will move on to the next set. But just know that this specially defensive set is very, very strong. And there are a ton of options you can use, even stuff that I haven't gone over, even though I switched every single move in Empoleon's toolbox. Just experiment, do what you think works. And I'm sure that you'll find some way to use this effectively. Empoleon is just such a good clue for a team when used in a set like this. Okay, now I'm biased. And I absolutely love this Focus Sash Empoleon set and how the Modest Sash set is so good. Now, I didn't go into as much depth about Torrent with the last set, but it is important to show in this sense. Torrent, what it does is when you're at 1/3 or less of your max health, your water attacks do 1.5 times more damage. That's on the physical side and the special side. So stuff like Scald gets multiplied up to over, I believe it's almost 120 power is how much Scald is doing, which is absolutely crazy damage. Imagine that coming off this modest nature here, which is 111 special attack. Hits very, very hard. And this Empoleon set just does work at the beginning of the match. Scald is here to just spread some status and be 100% accurate water move. I think it's better than Hydro Pump just because of how it always hits and has a chance to burn. Aqua Jet, we'll see why that comes into handy, but it is great for picking off those targets that will hit you. Something like a Donphan will Earthquake you, likely turn 1 as you Scald it. And just to make sure you aren't picked off by Ice Shard, you have Aqua Jet to pick it off first. Grass Knot is insane for handling Seismitoad, which thinks it can switch in, especially once an opponent sees how much damage you're dishing out with your Scald. And Stealth Rock is here that you almost never click on the set because I'm biased, and clicking the other moves is way too much fun. But Stealth Rock is here because Stealth Rock on a Sash lead is a pretty obvious choice. So how is this set so good? Well, let's start off by looking at this game, and no disrespect to my opponent whatsoever, Chrono is a legend. It's just unfortunate how this game was such a fantastic showcase of what Empoleon can do. So at the lead start, as you can see, I am an Empoleon with max speed. No matter what's going on with this Hippo here, I'm going to outspeed and hit it with a Scald. But what I didn't really expect, so he might not have been full HP invested or good IVs, the Scald one-shot this Hippo. So if this game went on longer, that was huge. He has a Stoutland Metagross oriented team. This is definitely Sand. And getting rid of the Sand turn 1 is brutal. That's one of the reasons people use Bold Pelipper in T2 or BQ, because Bold Pelipper is so durable that it won't likely ever be one-shot by any move. And that's why people use Hippo. It's so bulky. It's not likely one-shot by a move. But he was definitely surprised by the Scald. He may have thought it was Specs based on that damage. If he had good IVs, it could have even been a bug. And he brings out the Seismitoad next, maybe thinking I'm Specs. And the Seismitoad is also put down in the next turn by a Grass Knot. So turn 2, my Sash is still intact, and 2 Pokemon are dead. And whatever he sends out isn't going to be able to one-shot this Empoleon. So I can either get up Rocks or a Torrent boosted Modest Scald on whatever comes out. So this game, he did end up timing out. I don't blame him for how good the set ended up being against him. But it just shows how effective it can be, to be honest. Now, I have one more example, and this is not an example you would expect Empoleon to win, but we have this match versus KYK LMAO, and I start with my Empoleon here. The Galvantula uses Sticky Web, so keep in mind he didn't even attack. He didn't get greedy. He just used Sticky Web, so I'm not in Torrent range. And the Modest Scald still does 82% to this Galvantula here, which is crazy. So Sticky Webs are up, my Sash is still intact, and without even getting burned, this is what the Galvantula is at. Now the next turn, I decide, I was calcing here on the side, that's why the turn took a sec, and I saw Aqua Jet does kill. So I decided to click it and go for it, and I got the roll. So this is fantastic. Empoleon just 1v1 the Galvantula, Sash intact. So I do have to deal with Sticky Webs the game, but this is a great example of where if I didn't have Aqua Jet, sure, I could have gotten Rocks or I could have gotten the Scald off, but my Sash definitely would have been broken. So having Aqua Jet for this case was definitely fantastic for me. And then Toxic Rogue is a fantastic counter to Empoleon, and we will be going over that, so I was forced out the next turn. But this Empoleon set is amazing. It's what I would consider to be possibly anti-meta currently, and how it handles its matchups. Scald into Aqua Jet handles Donphan, Scald into Scald handles Fortress, Grass Knot for Kabutops and Seismitoad, as well as the more uncommon Swampert. Crobat matchups aren't bad for you because you're an Empoleon. You can Rocks if they don't taunt you, or you can just fire off a Scald. Protect could be used on this set to scout for something that a Mienshao or a Metagame uses, especially after, let's say, Crobat U-turns into Mienshao. In that case, your Sash is broken. But it's a little hard to give up a move. I think if you were to give up anything, you would keep Aqua Jet just because of how you can get some chip damage off at any time. So I would probably drop Rocks. Then you have to get Rocks on something else. So it's not as straightforward as it would seem. If they do end up going into a Mienshao or Metagame, the high jump kick is very obvious, I would say. And you can take the risk to go into your fighting resist at that point. Or if you think they'll click a coverage move such as knockoff. Empoleon does have respectable bulk, even being uninvested. So you can take that stuff like a knockoff pretty well and fire back a Scald. And yeah, so this Empoleon set, aside from having the great matchup versus dedicated leads, if they do lead with something like a let's just say Scarf Crook or a Scarf Mienshao, they might not assume you're Scarfed and just go for the Earthquake or the high jump kick. I think that is a somewhat bad play for the Crook because of how I showed that this spread always lives in unboosted Crook. But I have taken a few lives off Crooks that simply stay in and they just click Earthquake. So yeah, this set is just great. Like I said, it's anti-meta. I'm biased, but I'm showing you my tech and why I use it and how it works. The max speed on Modest is also just to tie Sylveon, which shows that you can run Flash Cannon on this set, but I think the other moves are extremely important. Now, even though this set is max speed, there's one more set here that I don't have replays for, and that is a Specs Empoleon, which essentially takes what I showed last time to the next level here. We're always in Torrent, essentially, with the choice specs. So all those Torrent calcs and all that Torrent boosted damage is just happening now. Scald, Hydro Pump, Grass Knot, Ice Beam to round out your coverage. This set here is faster than Mandibuzz. You don't have to go this fast. You can go full bulky. But I kind of like being faster than Mandibuzz still, just so I can't U-turn out or something on you. It seemed pretty good. And even with only 88 invest in EVs, just to show versus the Swellow, even though you don't have leftovers, your choice specs here. Choice specs. Yeah, Boom Burst is still only doing 38% max, so this isn't a 2-hit KO, even with just 88. Oh, I'll change this too. There you go. 41%, you're not even 2-hit KO'd with Rocks. Looking pretty good, pretty good. And now, one of the crazy calcs to showcase here and how specs can be so good is Torrents is just a broken ability. This powers up your water moves so much. So if we get into Torrent and we are Modest specs Hydro Pump, we're going to see that a Blissey doesn't even become a switch in here. Let me change this to leftovers. With a Blissey switching into a Hydro Pump, and provided you miss, a Blissey at full switching into Rocks and Hydro Pump, it's a 50-50 in the Blissey's favor, but this is freakishly amazing too. This is an absolutely incredible calc to show how insane the damage actually is. Thinking about another example that might be coming in, let's look at FizzDef Mandibuzz, not running any SPDEF, and this is a one-shot. So that's why I like to run this speed here, 168, just in case they are running something like a 252 Mandibuzz. You will always be faster, and this calc is super scary. I don't have actual replays yet to showcase this set, but because of its damage and these calcs here, I think it's worth showing. And again, so you give up the Sash and a reliable way to get into Torrents, but you have immediate power, and you just have to make the right prediction. In any case, even a Swampert that's running full SPDEF here, it's not going to be doing well versus a Grass Knot. Choice specs Grass Knot to a SPDEF Swampert is going to be OHKOing it most of the time. And that is astonishing damage, to be honest. So try this set, fool around with the EV spreads. I think you can go a lot bulkier if you want, but I like this amount of bulk just to make sure you outspeed Mandibuzz. But it can be acceptable just to let you know to do something like this, in my opinion. Going full out on HP to switch in as much as possible and slowly get you into Torrent as long as you switch into the right moves. And then use your insanely powerful Scald, Hydro Pump, and coverage moves. So that's a little bit about how Empoleon is the 80% win rate it is. And without going too crazy at the end, I know people are going to be curious, how do you counter these sets? And I will be showing a few counters real quick to how you can deal with these a bit better. Underrated to use Magneton, in my opinion. This is a Choice Specs Magnapole Magneton. As Empoleon is part Steel type, locking it in with a Magnapole pretty much ensures its demise. It's Steel type, so it can't be Toxic Stalled in any way, and Scald isn't going to be doing that much to it as it's not weak to it. So you can trap it in. If you need to go to this length to deal with Empoleon, maybe your opponent will end up bringing a Shed Shell and making you feel embarrassed, but it is a reliable way to remove it. Now, Hidden Power Grass is not something you're probably used to seeing in this game. You know, Magnezone is running HP Fire in T2 and BQ, and that's to deal with Ferrothorn. It seems weird to not see a fire coverage here in Hidden Power, but there is no Ferrothorn in T1. You have Fortress, which is still taking neutral damage from Thunderbolts, because unlike Grass, Bug does not resist Electric. So Thunderbolts is a fine way to trap that in my opinion. You want Grass because the Water Grounds resist your Flash Cannon and are immune to your other stab. So you run HP Grass to nuke them by surprise. Magnapole is not required, in my opinion. Analytic is also powerful in this tier, as it essentially makes the Magneton just become a nuke. Now, even though it's not as good for efficiently trapping the Empoleon as we gone over, Analytic can be good to just nuke something that tries to switch in. Toxic Rogue is a super obvious counter to Empoleon. I think this set will be on the rise. Nasty Plot set here with a Life Orb, being a special attacker because it has access to Vacuum Wave. And even though this is not a Toxic Rogue showcase, I do want to show Timid to Krook. We have 100% health. And you have Vacuum Wave. I noticed I made it 100 health instead of 100% here. Oh my gosh. +2. +2 Life Orb Vacuum Wave always kills Krook. So Krook, which may think it's a counter, is just going to be picked off by a +2 Vacuum Wave. And you do have a way to set it up. Dry Skin makes you immune to the Scalds completely. You actually get healed. And you're a poison type, so you can't be toxic. Toxic Rogue is definitely one of the better counters to Empoleon, and it can abuse coming in on it by setting up a Nasty Plot and using these coverage moves, so give it a shot. Heracross, it will take a fuck ton from the spec set, don't get me wrong. But from the normal defensive set, you can switch into a Scald no problem, especially if you're a gut set, because you're trying to get burned already. So who really cares? And Heracross is a Pokemon that just doesn't have many switch-ins in the tier. So even though you don't probably want to run Swords Dance, you probably just want to hit something, unlike Toxic Rogue that really needs the boost in damage to do enough. Heracross doesn't. So I would just switch in and I would click buttons versus Empoleon. Every time the Empoleon comes in versus a Heracross, as long as the Heracross user predicts correctly, it will be KOs, which is great. Nidoqueen is something that's just a very powerful Pokemon. It has the bulk to switch into a Scald or two despite being weak to it. And even though you don't really want to take burn damage, the burn itself doesn't really harm you in terms of your offenses because you are a special attacker. So you can consider Queen. It's probably the best to do on double switches. For example, when you predict an Empoleon to come in, you go into Queen rather than seeing an Empoleon in play and going Queen. I think doing it on the double is going to be a bit smarter. But even if you switch it in directly to Empoleon, as long as it's not a spec set, which you will fall over to, you can try to come in on it, I suppose. And you have enough damage because your Life Orb, Sheer Force boosted, Stab Earth Power is going to do a lot. And if you predict them to switch, you definitely have coverage moves to handle that. The last counter I'm going to show you is not the last counter in the tier. I just wanted to showcase the Zhoradin, a bulkier set in this case. You are prone to being toxic, but this is the first counter we've seen that can handle the Stealth Rock Empoleon by forcing it out with Volt Switch Thunderbolt, having coverage to handle the water grounds that can come in, Seismitoad Swampert, as well as even Crocodile if it wanted to be crazy and try to be a Volt blocker. It'll regret eating a Leaf Storm. But this Zhoradin has Defog, and you can even drop possibly one of your electric moves. I don't know, it's very hard to know to drop. Maybe you just run Discharge in this case then, and drop Volt Switch, spread some extra status, and then you can run Pain Split or Will-O-Wisp to handle the other switch-ins better. But Defog is a really good showcase of this Pokemon. And okay, just real quick, if you don't want to run the bulky EV spread that you see here, you can always just fall back on a Choice Scarf set and run something like this. But Timid Mo does make a pretty good counter no matter what you want to do to Empoleon. I did just want to show the Defog set in particular, but it is entirely up to you how you want to go about it. So closing thoughts, Empoleon, absolute monster in the tier, 80% win rate, doesn't go lightly. Yeah, it is something that is clearly very difficult to deal with, and I hope that after watching this video you see exactly what it is doing that makes it so powerful. Maybe you're inspired to go out and hunt your own, or maybe you're inspired to go after one of these counters to it and start slapping it on more of your teams. Anything you can do to handle Empoleon probably gives you a huge advantage over some of the top performing players right now that are using Empoleon on teams. What was your favorite set? Let me know in the comments, leave a like, and let me know what you want to see in the next video. I really hope you guys all enjoyed. As always, all the pace will be in the description, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.